Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hey, everybody. Welcome inside the lounge. Thanks so much for joining us. This episode brought to you by the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Kevin Armstrong, joined as always by my friends and colleagues, Alex Hobson, Peter Baracchini, and it's all good news this week, which is this is the first time this season. So keep on watching. We know we get plenty more views when it's bad news, but there are still some critical things to talk about. So the rundown will look like this. We will be talking about the recent games, and we will find negatives in each one of those wins. And then we will be talking about the trade rumors that are out there. And we're going to then look into the Marlies and into prospects and figure out where things are looking at that point and go from there. And then we have a special guest later on to set up the next week. So no, I'm not going to say that line. Well, without further ado, I guess I have to say that line now. But it's a 5-game winning streak now. And I'll be honest, until the Boston win, I still wasn't convinced because Vegas was really beat up. And then when Tampa Bay came in, Tampa Bay gave that game away. So the Boston win, though, that was all Toronto. Like, they played an excellent game and by far the best game they've played this season, in my view. Let's start with you, Peter, with your reaction to what we saw in the last week.
Yeah, I mean, there was going to be a lot of criticisms, especially with the Golden Knights game, considering the fact that they were down, Max Pacioretty, Mark Stone, Alex Tuch, and good thing Jack Eichel, not good thing that he's still on the IR, but imagine if he was healthy, that would have just been another problem in the Maple Leafs store. And if he was healthy on the team and the trade happened way before then. But I think you have to look back to the Pittsburgh Penguins game where they were down Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Russ, Jeff Carter, all their star players. And that was a perfect opportunity to take advantage and get a win. And I think they may have learned their lesson from that game where they came out flying. They won 4-0. They shut them out. They played with a purpose. Mitch Marner got a hot streak going as a result of that. So there's one positive to take from that. It's the fact that they took advantage of a team that's in a vulnerable situation. And in the NHL, you got to do that, especially if you're one of the top offensive teams, and the Leafs prove that. And I'm going to say the same thing about the Tampa Bay Lightning. Yeah, rough start, but they had the mentality and they were resilient. They came back and fought hard. And like you said about the Boston Bruins, that was a textbook beginning to end kind of win. They didn't falter. They didn't let the Bruins take advantage of them. They matched the physicality and intensity, and it was like a playoff game, which I know we don't want to reflect on that when we say Leafs, Bruins, and playoffs. But yeah, no, it was despite, some hiccups here and there, some mistakes. It was a textbook week for the Maple Leafs. And this was an important one to say, hey, this is the time for us to prove that we could keep up with the best of the best, regardless of injuries, regardless of what the outcome or the score is for the, 40, 20, 40, 60 minutes. We're going to play hard to the very end. And the Leafs did that. And that's a good starting point.
Alex?
What I saw this week was a team that has all their stars firing on all cylinders. And, this is a narrative that's been beaten to death going back to last year's playoffs, all over the offseason, and then through the first 7-8 games this season. This team is clearly just a completely different team when their top players are performing the way they're supposed to. And I will say, there are still some criticisms to be had. Obviously, you can take them from the Tampa Bay game. But at the same time, I think as a whole, this week has been much, much better for Leafs hockey than compared to what we've seen earlier on this season. And, it's great to see Marner snap out of his route. He's got, I think, 9 points in his last 3 games. Tavares is riding a 5-game point streak with 9 a 5-game point streak with 9 points in that span. Matthews has 6 points, 4 goals over his last 3 games. So it's nice to see all those guys who were struggling initially to kind of jump out of their shell. And at the same time, it is encouraging to see their power play finally start to make some noise, namely power play number 1. And, they had a pretty horrible rut through a six game stretch where they didn't have a single power play goal through 17 opportunities. And, over the past 3 games that they've been 5 for 10 on the power play. So perfect 500 rating over those past 3 games. And definitely some work to be done still, but it's encouraging to see the way that they're trending right now, I'd say.
Yeah. And it is nice to see the Millionaires Club starting to, they're cashing the checks properly now. Before it was free money. Now they're working for it. So well done for those guys. And as you said, it seems the rest of the team really pops when those guys are doing what they've been doing. And that's been a lot of fun to watch. The core 4 has scored the last 12 goals. So when they're going, the rest of the team is going. This is the Maple Leafs Lounge, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to check us out on all your favorite social media platforms and over on iHeartRadio. Listen to us in the podcast. And I would suggest a podcast right now because these two with their mustaches are freaking me out. So
they're great and you know it.
Next up is the talk of the town. Elliot Friedman talked about it. Chris Johnston, he thought the trade may have already happened on Friday, but the Leafs are shopping a defenseman, and it sounds like it's been very close a few times. I don't like this. I don't like it at all. It's to me, you've got 7 defensemen. I would put 4 of them at about the same caliber right now, where they would be interchangeable in those positions. You've obviously got Muzzin and Riley and Brody that are your guys, but the other guys, they could kind of go in and out. Sandin, you might want to put into that top 4. He's been great. Mm-hmm. But Liljegren, Dermott, and Hull they're kind of interchangeable in my view, which is a good thing because you need the depth. We're a long way away from the end of this season and hopefully a playoff run. Why on earth would you be getting rid of a defenseman? And then I saw Chris Johnston was talking about the fact that this could be a curd salary cap issue where they're trying to get money so they would have more money available at the trade deadline. And if they were to get rid of Dermott, which please don't get rid of Dermott, because the Liljegren is suddenly showing up, that would only be a savings of $600,000. Like, first off, is it really worth getting rid of that depth for $600,000? And is it really in that bad of a situation that $600,000 is now where this team is at to just try to get some breathing room and for moves that are going to have to make? So I don't like it. It sounds like it's happening, but I don't like it. So, Alex, how about you? Where are you on this trade?
I'm in the same boat as you if it means trading Dermott, but I'm not necessarily in the same boat if it means trading Justin Hall. Basically, my reasoning for that is Timothy Liljegren has played himself onto the team at this point. He's been on the ice for every game during this winning streak, and he's not really giving the Leafs any reason to want to put him on the bench again. I think him and Sandin have found some real chemistry on that bottom pairing. And on that note, I think Travis Dermott as well this year. I know that he had a conversation with Sheldon Keefe before the season started about his role, and he seemed to recognize that his role could be in jeopardy, and he's doing everything he can to make sure that he gets himself a full-time roster spot this year and actually brings something every night. In terms of Justin Hall, it's just tough to be in a position where, he's making $2 million and I'm not going to say he's worth or not worth that right now, but he has been the worst of the seven defensemen this year, and having him on the bench over and over, as much as you want to get Liljegren into the lineup, it's kind of tough to have this $2 million wasting away on the bench. So I think I don't know if the Leafs should go out to make a trade just for the purpose of making a trade. I think that there's got to be a proper deal for them to make that would make sense for both sides. And if it meant trading away Justin Hall, what I do like about the idea of that is you've got a guy in the minors in Alex Biega who has played the role of a 7th defenseman before. So in the event that an injury happens, he played that role in Vancouver. He played that role in Detroit. I think he was actually a regular defenseman for Detroit, but they're in a different situation. So if the Leafs were to move Hall, you've got Biega who can fill that role until the trade deadline. And then at the deadline, I mean, these depth defensemen are a dime a dozen. You can pick one up. There are probably going to be a ton available and available for a cheap price at that. So I don't know. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Kevin, involving Dermott. I wouldn't want to trade Travis Dermott, but if there is a deal available to be made for Hall, I can kind of get on board with that just based on the position he's in and the money he's making.
Right. Makes sense. On the flip side of that, what I always think when players are struggling and everyone says trade them is like, well, does that mean the other 31 teams are completely oblivious to the fact that this player has struggled? And who is the team out there that then wants to get a guy that is struggling and pay him $2 million to possibly be a healthy scratcher sitting on the bench? There's always the flip side, right? They've got to be the buyer on the other side of the cell. So Peter, where are you at with this deal?
Yeah, I was trying to scroll through my timeline to try and find a tweet where that if there was something to be done with Hall or Dermott, the price was going to be high. And if there's going to be a return where the price is going to be high for Travis Dermott or Justin Hall, you take that deal and you run with it, because I don't think you're going to find a better deal at this point. I can't remember who said it. I will try to find it later on or correct myself next week and make a note of it. But I do agree with Alex too. I think Travis Dermott holds more value despite him seeing some good moments and some bad moments up at the top, pairing with Morgan Riley. I do think that Justin Hall and his cap hit is going to be a major tipping point for the Maple Leafs, because if they want to clear up cap space, what are you going to have, or what are you going to do? I'd rather move on Hall in his $2 million contract than anything else. And one of our co-writers, Shane Sandy, wrote a really great in-depth piece on the whole entire rumors and everything like that. I'd go and recommend and read that. But also, you look at what else is going to happen in the lineup as well. Yes, looking at cap friendly, you also have to worry about Ilya Mikheyev when he comes back at his 1.6. Is someone like Pierre Engvall going to be expendable as well, because he's making around 1.25? If they want to move on from him, that's an option. I know they just signed him, but Nick Ritchie at 2.5. Can they get a better fourth line player, or can they call somebody up? There are a lot of options that they can explore right now, and players who have a not necessarily high cap hit, it's reasonable. It's just not matching the production or what they had hoped for. But I do think that, again, if money is a major tipping point, you do have some contracts that can be moved out or packaged up in a deal to get a really good return.
Yeah. And I will still say on the end of that is that who are these GMs that are going to take these contracts and of struggling players unless there's some sort of incentive on their end?
But on that note, LA just lost Drew Doughty for a couple months and Sean Walker for the rest of the season. And those two are very key right-handed defensemen for them. So something to think about. But
the Kings are in town, so you can have a conversation right now. Yeah.
And also, it was Darren Dreger that reported the comment on Hall and Dermott saying that if there was a team to inquire or acquiring about them, they would have to pay for either player. And that was from a Twitter account from NHL Watcher, who transcribes everything that's on the radio. So,
okay. So it's not only the big club that is talked about here. We are in depth at the Hockey Writers and looking at all aspects of this team. So we're going to start with one step down with the Marlies, because Peter wrote a article checking out the Marlies and where things are at with them. Alex just mentioned a defenseman right there that could fill a void as well. So Peter, take us through what's going on with the Marlies right now.
I mean, their season has been kind of in flux. I mean, so their record probably doesn't match. I mean, their record in play is kind of inconsistent at this point, but there are players that are standing out. And I think you have to look at the top three in scoring right now, who were also standouts for the Maple Leafs during or two out of the three were standouts during the preseason, and Kirill Semyonov and Josh Ho-Sang. I mean, Semyonov is looking pretty good, point per game pace, really strong playmaking abilities. And Josh Ho-Sang is just a few goals under a goal per game, 6 and 8, 7 points in 8 games, looking really good. I mean, if there's a point where you want to sign somebody and bring somebody up, Josh Ho-Sang is going to be that guy, because he's got that offensive flair. He's got that tenacious attitude that can be an energy, grind it out kind of player. Obviously, he needs an NHL contract in order to be called up. He's currently on an AHL one, but if he continues to play like this, it's going to look really promising. And there's another depth forward that you could have at your disposal at this point. And one other player that really caught my eye was Alex Steeves. I mean, this is a player who caught the eye of Haley Wickenheiser during the development camp and saying how he was already, playing with a pro mentality and playing like a pro already. And so far in 4 games, 6 points, 5 goals. Similar to the goal scoring ability of Josh Osang, but his speed, his ability to play a complete game in on both sides of the puck in all situations. If there is another player to come up with the mentality that they want someone who can score or chip in offensively every now and then, but play a steady game, then Alex Steeves is going to be your guy. I don't know if exactly, maybe he needs a few more games to get acclimated to the pro level, but from what I'm seeing early on, he's living up to the potential. And from being signed out of college, I think it's looking really good for him. In terms of defensemen, I mean, Alex mentioned Alex Biega, but that was a bit of a tongue twister right there. They called up Christian Rubens in the midst of where Travis Dermott blocked a shot and maybe he wasn't ready to go for the game against Tampa Bay. Then they called him up and then they sent Rubens down. So I'm wondering if the way that he's played early on, or the fact that the Keith alluded to his maturity and his ability to play a complete game, sort of gave them another option, even though he's a left-handed shot and not on the right side. I think Rubens could possibly come in and be that, reliable depth defender, 7th D-man who could come in and play every now and then to give somebody a night off, like not a Travis Dermott, but maybe a Rasmus Sandin or even a Timothy Liljegren if he's capable of playing on his offside. So those are some names that really caught my eye. And another one I'm just going to throw out is Joseph Duzek, who's looking, again, another player who's looking really sharp early on. Again, may not be a consistent NHLer, but someone who could be another call-up in the future.
I thought when Steeves was in training camp, he was impressing a lot of guys. And I thought that there was talk that he could have made it, but he was put on the IR right after training camp too. So I wonder
if an injury during the rookie tournament at Traverse City.
Right. Yeah. So maybe he just got delayed there, and we haven't seen the last of him so far. So let's go a little bit deeper, Alex, with the prospects. These guys always get the big attention during World Juniors, but they're playing year round, trying to get onto their NHL teams. And we know that there's some exciting prospects in waiting to one day be on the Marlies and then one day be on the Leafs. So take us through what those guys are up to these days.
Yeah, so I for those that don't know, I started my weekly prospect column last week, and I've got my 2nd edition coming out tomorrow, and I am very, very excited about this one because the Leafs prospects are kind of doing the work for me. All they have to do is perform, and I'll write about them. So I touched on Axel Rindell last week. He was a 7th round pick, right-handed Finnish defenseman in 2020, and he had a bit of a slow start to the season after putting up some impressive numbers in his previous 2 seasons, but he just got traded to the team that another Leafs prospect in Topi Niemela plays for. And Niemela might be known a little more affectionately among Leaf fans because he was a standout for Finland at the World Juniors last year, and he's kind of been playing above where he was drafted. And so Rindell joined Niemela on, I believe it's Karpat in the Finnish league. And in his first game, he scored his first goal. And in his second game, he tallied 4 assists. So actually, it was either 4 or 5 assists, but either way, he had an incredible night. So I'm going to touch on him a little bit. And there are also a couple players in the NCAA that are really catching my eye this year. One of them is a 7th rounder from, I want to say it was either 2020 or 2019. Ryan Twyrberg is kind of flew under the radar, but he's been off to a hot start as well. He's a left winger. He's got 12 points in 8 games so far. And another one is Nick Abruzzese. And he was a 4th round pick of the team in 2019, I want to say. And he's off to just a ridiculous start to his season as well. I think he's got something like 6 or 7 points in his first 3 games. So there are a couple of guys worth keeping an eye on in the NCAA. And of course, like Peter said, Alex Steeves is off to a great start for the Marlies. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, he's got 5 goals in his first 4 games.
Yes.
So he is off to a sizzling start in the AHL. And I'm also going to be touching on the Newfoundland Growlers because they kind of had a delayed start to their season, and they just got their season underway. And I believe they won their first game and lost their second. So good to see those guys in the ECHL getting back at it. All in all, lots to look forward to on the prospect front.
I will update you on that one because I've been following the Newfoundland Growlers and their situation that's going on out there. They're now 5-0. Got to play their first home game. And the reason being there is that they were playing in St. John's, and there's a workplace investigation going on. There's no other details of what that means. The team thinks that the team was kicked out, and they don't think it was fair that they were kicked out of the arena when there's nothing against them. They're not even told what the situation is at this point. They get kicked out. The Marlies say, come and play at the Coliseum with us. But these are minor leaguers. They've got family in Newfoundland. They don't want to uproot their whole family. And they were able to find South Conception Bay is where they're playing now. And it's an arena where they fit in last night, 1,100 people, jam-packed. They used to play in front of 7,000 jam-packed in St. John's. But it's quite a story out there. And the owner has said, I'm not going back to St. John's. He is so upset. It sounds like this has been going on for a little while, but the owner of the Growlers says he's going to build his own arena. It will not be in St. John's, and they're going to go from there. And it sounds like the South Conception Bay, that it was great for them to open the doors, but there's a lot of scheduling conflict there. It's a local arena, right? So, but it sounds like they're going to try to play the majority of the games on the island. So interesting situation on the ECL front. It's always interesting. I love that Newfoundland Growlers logo though. And nice to see them. Yeah. And nice to see them back, because they with COVID, they didn't play. It was 600 days since that team has played, and nice to see them back. So we're going to take a short little break here because we've got a special segment coming up next, and we're going to be previewing the following week. So one quick second while we adjust. All right, and we're joined by Colin Newby now, who is with the Hockey Writers, but his specialty is the Philadelphia Flyers. We've missed the Philadelphia Flyers. We have not seen them in a long time play against the blue and white. So we thought this would be an interesting segment to try to get reacquainted with this team that we used to enjoy play the blue and white, just haven't had a chance to. So Colin, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about the storylines around this team right now.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. The Flyers came into this year really from an off-season overhaul. They were completely dissatisfied from what happened last year. They finished sixth in the temporary Mass Mutual East Division last year, and they really got embarrassed by a lot of their division rivals. Boston, even Buffalo had a couple blowouts on them. The Rangers beat them 9-0 and 8-3 in two different games. So they wanted to get stronger defensively. They wanted to get harder to play against, and they made some additions of real character guys. Cam Atkinson came in from Columbus. Keith Yandel was signed to play on the third pair. Rasmus Ristolainen has a reputation as a strong teammate, and they added these guys to really change the central character of the dressing room. And so far it's worked out. They're 6-2-2, and they played with some good energy early on.
Now, Peter, you might want to ask these questions about, because I'm kind of excited to see Carter Hart, and I know you've loved him for a long time. So you fire away with that one.
Yeah, so in regards to Carter Hart, Colin, last year, obviously, it was a season that he and maybe the Flyers and fans would like to forget. But despite the record, his numbers are, looking pretty impressive early on. And again, the record may not indicate that, but he does seem to be having a bounce back performance. How do you think his season has progressed so far? And is this trending in the right direction for him and the Flyers?
Absolutely. Just with all the off-season analysis we all did in Philadelphia, one thing really stood out going into the season. All of this is irrelevant if Carter Hart doesn't have a bounce back. So far, so good. As you said, his record isn't great, but I don't think he's necessarily responsible for that. Even last weekend against the Calgary Flames, the Flyers lost 4-0, but it was 2-0 with I think 3 or 4 minutes left in the game. And the only reason it was within reach is because Hart stood on his head. The Flyers gave nothing in front of him, but his final stat line doesn't look great. He had another game against the Penguins on Thursday where I would say the same. He stopped a lot of high danger chances. It was a very wide open game, and he kept them off the scoreboard for the most part, ended up letting a OT winner to Chris Letang, but overall his performance is great. He's playing confidently. His structure in front of him looks a lot more sound, which was a huge concern last season. And he's especially made some highlight reel saves on the penalty kill.
Alex, you look like you're chomping at the bit to jump in there. You're up next.
Well, obviously, Colin, we know that with the Flyers, we haven't seen him in a while, but we still know some of the main guys to keep an eye on. Sean Couturier is always going to be a threat. I know Joel Farabee's become a real important part of that team. I was just wondering, from a Flyers fan's perspective, are there any guys on the team who have maybe been contributing in ways that maybe the common fan or the non-Flyers fan might not see, or any guys that we should be keeping an eye on?
Sure. Well, like you said, the big guns are there. You got Sean Couturier and Claude Giroux, the veterans. Giroux's off to a great start. You mentioned Farabee. He really had a breakout season last year. He led the team with 20 goals, and he's only 21 right now. He's played a better two-way game, I would say, this season. Hasn't put up the same stats, but he's still been very effective. I would also say Atkinson. I knew him as a player in Columbus. He's not the biggest name, but he has put up some good numbers in the past. I just really love him and what he's brought as like a spark plug type of player in Philadelphia this season. He's been great on the penalty kill. He had a shorthanded goal last week. He had another breakaway last night against the Capitals, shorthanded. The guy just plays with a lot of energy. He's got a lot of bite. And he's off to a hot streak. He had 6 goals in the first 6 games, and I think 1 since. But he's been a great addition to this point, really firing on net also in a shoot first mentality.
Yeah, I think Cam Atkinson he's kind of been one of the most underrated players in the league for a while. And I remember when the Flyers made that trade with the Blue Jackets, I think a lot of people at first were upset about it. Correct me if I'm wrong, just because Voracek's been such a household name in Philadelphia. But I remember liking that trade a lot for both teams at the time. So
I would agree. And I think it's just a stylistic fit. Voracek, he was getting a little older. As you said, he was in Philadelphia for 10 years. Put up some great numbers, but I think it was best overall stylistically, plus his cap hit was over $8 million. They got a little bit of a break there bringing in Atkinson. So I did like the trade overall, but sure, it's a shame to see Voracek go. He compiled a lot of stats over many years, and he's a great hockey player. He's doing well in Columbus also now, though.
So the schedule for the Maple Leafs is hosting the LA Kings. Then they're out to Philadelphia on Wednesday, back home to face Calgary, and then down to see Buffalo. Now, the interesting thing that I wanted to ask you on this, Colin, is anytime you ever look, it's pretty much tattooed in my brain, actually. Whenever I think of playing in Philadelphia, I think of that fan that fell into the penalty box with Ty Domi. That's just kind of how I see the whole fan base of Philadelphia. Sorry if that's offensive to anybody, but do you think with such a long time between being able to see each other, because these guys did have a hot rivalry in the 90s and early 2000s, do you think the fans are that kind of heat and emotion can come back, or is it going to take a little while?
Maybe it'll take a little while. I certainly don't think it's dead, though. I just simply can't blame you for that being the first thing that you would associate with. It's a pretty difficult thing to forget. That guy, he's from Delaware County, where I grew up, and there's stories all over the place about the fallout from that incident. It was a complete mess. And I think they're two passionate fan bases also. I love following what you guys do and scrutinizing every single solitary play the Maple Leafs make. Flyers fans are like that to an extent, but we always say around here that Eagles fans are like that. If you follow the NFL, that's just hammer somebody on every play. But I mean, I think with two prominent fan bases, especially, you mentioned back in the 90s, early 2000s, I remember Jeremy Roenick and Darcy Tucker. Those guys used to get in each other's faces, really hated each other out on the ice. So there is some juice there. If both teams get to the playoffs, that would certainly pick it up. For a matchup in November, I don't know if it would spark that quickly because, as you said, they haven't played since the 1920 season. But we'll see. The Flyers, they've gotten in a couple of fights this year, probably more than they did all of last year already. Just adding some toughness up front and then Rasmus Ristolainen on the back end. So it wouldn't shock me.
That'd be interesting. And Wayne Simmons played for the Flyers as well. So
Yeah,
I don't know. He probably is friends with everybody, but he'll say, "Hey, buddy, you wanna have a fight?"
Until they get on the ice, he's friends.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's a good segue into some of the comment corners that we've got from the last show. And keep in mind, this was the last show, so this was before the winning of the previous week. But one person said, "Stop complaining, Leaf Nation. You got to win. You guys are the biggest problem, not the team." I totally, you know what, though, as I've been watching sports and teams react to social media, I don't know if you've seen, Colin, you brought up the NFL there with the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been so dominant for a while now. They won a Super Bowl, they go an AFC championship. They struggle this year and everyone hates them. And they're like, you know, they're throwing their arms up like, what do you guys want from us? I think this is actually just a sports thing now where the negativity gets through a lot easier, I guess, for anybody. It doesn't matter what team it is, how big, but obviously the bigger the fan base, the more negativity is going to be there just because that's how it works. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Is the fan base for either team? Is that an issue at this point?
I mean, let's face it, fan bases have always been, you know, and I think Matthew summed it up perfectly. When everything's going, or just recently, when things are going great, the highs are highs, and when things are going bad, the lows are lows, and that's to be expected no matter what. I could tell you, like, when I was growing up as a Leaf fan, whenever they would win, I'd be like, oh my God, yes, this is awesome. I love being a Maple Leafs fan. But when they were on a losing streak, especially, you know, during the tough times of the mid 2010s and on, or after the first lockout in 04-05, that's when reality started to set in. It's like, man, what are we doing? Like, obviously learning more about the business side and transactions and everything like that, player evaluation. You get to know that side of things, and you get to sort of form more of like a concrete evaluation instead of just throwing your arms up in the air, which is what, you know, the fan bases tend to do. But I think it's just a normal part of it. I mean, obviously there's, you know, critical criticisms of what needs to be said, and then they're just going over the line. And I think at some point fans do cross the line quite a bit, and that's just taking it too far. So common criticisms for fans, it's great. You want to see your team succeed, but if you cross that line, then we got a bit of a problem here.
Now, one fan brought up that the Leafs are worse than last season and pointed to the Pens game as the biggest example of that. And I wanted to ask you, Colin, you obviously probably, that one went around. We can't hide that one. They got dismantled 7-1 to a lot of call-ups for the Penguins. You've seen the Penguins a lot more than us for the last couple of seasons here. Are they a good team to be able to pull that off, or was that just Toronto being a horrible team?
Well, as much as I hate to say this, I have to give Pittsburgh credit for everything that they do. They've been an arch rival of the Flyers pretty much my entire life. But as you said, I've watched them closely from that, and you just need to give them credit. Every single season we say, oh, well, the Penguins are aging. Crosby's getting up there, Malkin's getting up there. But have they ever fallen out of the race? No. So you have to credit Mike Sullivan there. It seems like whoever's out on the ice gets the job done. They can plug players in. They can get the most out of, as you said, they got a lineup of call-ups, but somehow they always seem to pull it off. So credit the organization. I wouldn't necessarily say just to hammer the Leafs on that one, because the Penguins have the depth to do it, and their track record in the past 6-7 years or so, really, that speaks for itself.
Yeah. Talking about the Pens, I watched the game against Minnesota last night with the 2 empty net goals in the third period, and then they won it in a shootout. But you're starting to see the fatigue wear in on these guys that are the regulars that are getting more ice time. But like we said, the big guns will be back soon, and the Penguins will be right there. So it's early. It's the best sport in the world to watch. That's why we love talking about it here in the Maple Leaf Lounge. We thank Colin for swinging by. The lounge is always open to all of our friends, even if you wear blue and white or not. We will see you next week in the Maple Leafs Lounge.